So I'm not even kidding when I say today might change the way that you look at modulation in music, and I mean it. So today we're going to be talking about transient modulation, which is the way that Tchaikovsky describes it in his treatise. There it is, right there for you. I don't know. This is interesting. Okay. So the reason why this is so interesting compared to the way that we might even think about modulation period is just because of the way in which he is describing modulation and its effect here. And even the word transient in itself, I love. I love that. It's like this idea of, rather than having what most of us would think of today as a direct modulation going between two keys but interspersing different tonicizations in between, it's more of a fluid contingency in between. So let's learn about it. Essentially, Tchaikovsky is just saying here that we're going to be passing between one or two different keys. And as we're going through these different keys, we're going to be doing prolonged cadences to actually show where we're ending up, rather than just the cadences that bring us to these periodic stops, which could also be equal tonicization, so long as there was a cadence that made it efficable. So if you might be thinking to yourself right now, well, how is this different than anything else that I've learned before? I'm going to direct you towards Kafka and Payne. So if you've seen this textbook before, it's clear that you've definitely taken a college-level harmony class. Tonal harmony, as far as I understand, is the default textbook in many United States universities. The Stephen Kafka, Dorothy Payne, Byron Elliman, this 7th edition is actually something I only used once in all of my time in university. And if I remember right, it wasn't even for an actual harmony class. I think it was for... it surprises me that I say that because I think it was tied to harmony, but it wasn't directly a harmony class per se. Anyway, besides the point. What I'm trying to get at here is that if you look at the way that Kafka-Payne is looking at this type of modulation, you can see that it's very much non-linear. Again, that's just in my opinion. Again, I didn't really use this textbook too much, and hopefully someday this will be something that I go through on this channel, so that way somebody wanting to take a university level harmony course could take it directly from this 7th edition book. But what I'm trying to say here is that even in the section describing this Mozart example, it's titled direct modulation. And you can't even call this Mozart example phrase modulation because there are no phrases here. But this is the type of example where there is a combination of sequence, but also a combination of harmonies. And these harmonies hit these ticker points, and these ticker points don't make it very clear that there's a transient motion to this harmony going from D flat major to B major. Sure, it makes stops technically in E flat minor and D and C minor, but in reality, what we're looking at here is one contingent motion that has those little markers, but they're not really meant to be something that is drawn out from the example, if you ask me. Whereas if you look at the Tchaikovsky example, you see that even in the way in which Tchaikovsky decided to notate it, exemplifies that there is only a brief nature of these tonal areas, and there's not actually meant to be that very distinct moment where there is a tonicization of another tonal center. So if you're asking yourself right now still, what is the big difference? I think what I've taken away from this, and again, this is my opinion, but please, again, if you're dealing with compositional difficulties, especially dealing with modulation, this is eye-opening for me. Because instead of this idea of a direct modulation kind of hitting these ticker points or these marks on the way to its new destination, this idea from Tchaikovsky that it's more of this linear congruency, and i.e. transient, makes it so that way getting to a different point of modality, tonality, etc. is extremely accessible, because he's using the dissonant harmonies that have been built upon, especially those that are tied to mediant relationships from the previous chord, so that way there's a continual line of motion from these dissonances to lead into whatever you're trying to tonicize. I think that's how you say that. But essentially, let's jump into an example where I made a bass line that I'm just going to be harmonizing to get to a new tonal area, and we'll see where we can go from there. So again, for this chapter, the examples that Tchaikovsky recommends to us is just simply to make different types of modulatory exercises that deal with constructing numerous different types of modulating sequences, essentially. So these modulating sequences, yes, although he does call them making them as sequences, when you look at the bass lines from his examples, there are no real sequences that are actually present. And even if you analyze the different chords as I have, yes, there have been sequences when it deals with extreme dissonant harmony. However, in the prior examples, at the beginning of the transient modulation chapter, that was not the case. There might have been different types of sequences that could have been made present throughout it, but it wasn't so much as direct as it would have been, again, from the Casca pane. But again, just to re-emphasize, it's using these dissonant chords that you can build off of these bass tones, and then finding different types of relationships with common tones, particularly those built off of a mediant relationship, that then allow us to get to these new tonal areas. And other than that, we're done for the day. So I hope that this actually gives you a really good idea of what you can do with even these simple dissonant chords in music, and making modulations that are not just convincing, but they're also just fun and exciting to do. Better than, in my opinion, again, better than the ideas from Casca and Payne when analyzing some of these ways in which we've currently viewed harmony. This is one of the reasons why I love looking at treaties like Tchaikovsky, because people like Mozart, from the example, weren't thinking of harmony as like ticker points, right? They're thinking of it as an active living thing that's making a journey. And again, I've said this a few times during this entire course, it's about the story. So I hope you tell yours through transient modulation. But I'm done for the day, so peace.